Welcome, everybody, to Layers of Truth, True Crime Collective. We are glad you're back with us again on a Friday evening. We're going to be talking about the Beverly Jarosz case. She was a young lady that went missing a long time ago, and we are going to get into that.
Wait. She did not go missing. She was murdered.
Did I say went missing?
I thought I heard that.
Okay. Well, thanks for correcting me.
No problem.
Yeah. Beverly Jarosz was a vivacious 16-year-old girl with a radiant smile and a love for life. She was an honor student at Marymount High School in Garfield Heights, Ohio, adored by her friends and admired by her teachers. Known for her kindness and creativity, Beverly dreamed of becoming a teacher, with plans to attend college after graduation. But behind her cheerful demeanor, Beverly harbored a growing fear. Anonymous phone calls and unsettling gifts suggested someone was watching her. Just days after Christmas in 1964, her promising life was cut tragically short, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt her family, friends, and investigators for decades. So what happened to Beverly Jarosz? And who was responsible for the unspeakable violence that shattered a bright future? First of all, let's set the scene. The crime occurred in the small town of Garfield Heights, Ohio. The population today is only around 29,000. On December 28, 1964, when the crime occurred, the average temperature for that day was 40 degrees. The morning of December 28, 1964 was cold and crisp in the small Ohio town with frost glistening on the bare tree branches. The holiday spirit still lingers as Christmas decorations sparkle along Main Street, and the homes display glowing lights and wreaths on their doors. The day begins early for most families. Dads are up with sunrise, scraping frost from car windshields before heading off to work, perhaps. Perhaps it's a local factory or nearby farm. Moms prepare breakfast, eggs, bacon, and toast, while the kids lounge in their pajamas, enjoying a few more days of winter break. Coffee percolates on the stovetop, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. Shops on Main Street open about 9 a.m. when the town starts to stir. The hardware store sees a few handymen stocking up on tools for winter repairs, while mothers stop by the Five and Dime for after Christmas sales. The scent of fresh bread drifts from the bakery where customers pick up loaves and chat about the latest town news. By afternoon, the kids play with Christmas toys, Lionel trains running circles around their tracks, or the newest board games spread out on living room floors. Some families tune into the radio for news or music. The Beatles' I Feel Fine, still riding high on the charts, plays over the airwaves, giving a modern touch to the quiet Midwestern town. Beverly and her 12-year-old sister Carol, who shared a bedroom in the house on Thornton Avenue in Garfield Heights, were home on Christmas break. They ate breakfast and saw their parents, Ted and Eleanor, off to work. They walked to visit their grandmother, Marie Vanek, a mile away up Turney Road, and stayed for lunch. The boy next door to their grandmother drove Beverly home to meet her friend Barbara, a classmate at Marymount. The girls planned to go visit another classmate, Margie. Home before 1 p.m., Beverly called her mother to check in. She wrote a message to her father from someone who said he'd call back, leaving a name that turned out to be phony. Grandma Vanek called, and Beverly said she had to go. She was expecting Barb and had to change. So that was the way it was that day in Garland. So what
Garfield
do you think
Heights.
about Garfield Heights? What do you think about that, Mafuz?
You explained everything very well, and the only thing that I would even have to add here at all is just for people who are not familiar with Garfield Heights, it is a Cleveland suburb of Ohio. So Cleveland is a major city, and it is a suburb of Cleveland in Ohio, United States. And we can move on to the next part now.
Okay, great. Beverly's friend Barbara was dropped off at Beverly Jarosz's home at 1:25 p.m. by her mother, and she got no answer when she knocked on the front door. She then went around to the side door and discovered that the storm door was locked, but the inner door was slightly ajar. Barbara quickly became uneasy at the scene. Something just didn't feel right. After all, Beverly was expecting her. So why was the door locked and the radio blasting? And it was hard rock, and Beverly didn't like that kind of music. She was into jazz and classical music. She also heard muffled noises from upstairs that suggested that something was amiss. What do you think about that, Matthias?
So first off, actually, the part about rock music, that is false. So the
Really?
sources that because there are a bunch of sources that posted that online, but it was proven to be false. It was actually classical music, but it was blasting way too loud for like it was blasting way too loud for like for for normal, basically. Like Beverly would not have, or Beverly or anyone else would not have been blasting music so loud to the point where you could hear it from the driveway. And also, so when Barbara, so okay, like this is according to Barbara, obviously, and I'll get more into Barbara later on and her story, but according to her, when she was dropped off by her mom around 1:25 p.m. When she, so the side door is the main door that the Jarosz family used. So the front door they used here and there, but the side door was closest to the driveway. And like when they got off the car, like the family car, or like if someone else is dropping them off home, they would use the side door to enter and exit. So the side door was their main door. The front door they used here and there. The back door they never used. And the back door is actually where where the two anonymous gifts were left, and we'll get into that part later. But as when Barbara arrived, something that is notable is like, and this is obviously according to her. So the like the storm door, the screen door, it was locked, but the inner door that actually led into the house, it was open. So Barbara could like assuming there was something to see through, she could see inside the house, but she wasn't able to get inside. So yeah, that is all I have to say on this specific part.
Okay, well, thanks for clearing that up about the music. I evidently got that from another source that wasn't
Yeah,
reliable.
yeah. A lot. The problem with this case is, and like it's actually frustrating. A lot of people over the years have put out many false narratives and misconceptions, and just false information in general. But like, luckily, I've been thoroughly investigating this case for almost 4 years now. Like I've known about this case since July 2017, and then March 2021, I started taking a deep dive into it, and I've learned a ton of stuff since. And yeah, when it comes to someone who's not like law enforcement or related to the victim, I am just as knowledgeable on the case as anyone else who has interest on it, to put it lightly, I guess. But yeah. So I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add to that, but I'm ready to move on to the next part when you are.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the disturbing noises upstairs. Barbara heard a series of loud thumps from upstairs, which caused her to become worried about her friend. Later, it was determined that Beverly's killer was likely still in the house at that time. Perhaps Barbara knocking on the door stopped the killer in his or her tracks and then ran away. The chilling detail could have significant implications for the timeline of the crime and the potential for witnesses. So, what about that, mofos?
Yeah, so like when I first found out about this case, that was something that stood out to me right away. And like assuming that everything, assuming the story that was given by Barbara was 100% true, that definitely would suggest that whoever killed Beverly was already inside and already in the midst of killing her. And so when Barbara either like when she rang the doorbell and or knocked on the door, that kind of made Beverly's killer and Beverly, because like there was a struggle going on in the upstairs bedroom, so that made them both kind of get frantic, and like, so assuming that the story's true, that's where the thump would have come from. So Barbara was saying that she heard a loud thud, like furniture moving, and yeah, that is basically, that's basically what she said she heard. And another thing is that she also said she also left like according to her, she also left like 5 to 15 minutes after that, thinking that either Beverly was mad at her for being late, or Beverly was trying to play a prank on her. That second part especially is kind of it kind of sounds odd to me, but yeah, that is just something interesting of note.
Yeah, that is interesting, very much. All right, let's get on to the next part. Thaddeus Jarosz discovers the scene. Beverly's father, Thaddeus, returned home around 4 p.m. after being alerted and found her bedroom in complete disarray. Thaddeus Jarosz's heart must have shattered as he walked into the chaos of his daughter's bedroom, a stark, unthinkable contrast to the safe scene home he had left that morning. The disarray, the sight of overturned furniture, scattered personal items, and the chilling presence of blood splatter told a story too horrific to process in that moment. As a father, the immediate anguish would be joined by a rising tide of questions. How could this happen in their quiet neighborhood? What unimaginable pain had his daughter endured? And above all, who could commit such an act of savage violence against his beloved Beverly? This moment not only marked the beginning of an enduring nightmare for the Jarosz family, but also cast a long, dark shadow over the tight-knit community of Garfield Heights. Imagine a dad coming home to that. That's horrible.
Yeah, that's absolutely heartbreaking, and I just can't put it in words. And to add on to what you were saying, Beverly was stabbed 42 times in total, and the stab wounds were in intervals of 3, meaning that whoever killed her, they stabbed 3 times in a blur, and then paused, and then stabbed 3 times in a blur again, and then and they did it to her basically all over her body. And she was also strangled with a rope, and the strangulation was actually the official cause of death. So like she was being stabbed and strangled simultaneously, but the strangulation, like she gave into the strangulation, like as in she succumbed before all the stab wounds were inflicted. So like this was obviously overkill. Whoever did this obviously had a personal grudge. And another thing that is noteworthy is the medical examiner, Samuel Gerber, who was a veteran by that point. He served in the infamous Cleveland torso murders, which is a series of dismemberment murders done by a serial killer who's still identified. And he served in World War II. And he was also known for serving in the infamous Sam Shepard case. And he called Beverly Jarosz's crime scene the worst scene he ever witnessed.
Okay. We kind of got ahead of me there. Beverly's condition, she was found bound with rope, face down, partially clothed, and bearing over 40 stab wounds. The killer's actions reveal both a personal and brutal nature to the crime. The bindings and torn clothing suggest premeditation and a possible sexual motivation, even though no assault occurred. The sheer number of stab wounds points to overkill, signaling intense anger or obsession. Yeah, that was definitely overkill.
Easily. And there's no doubt that whoever did this knew her and had a very personal grudge against her.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into the autopsy. The autopsy revealed that Beverly died from a combination of stabbing and strangulation, as you already mentioned, inflicted by a robust, rather large person. The findings provide crucial forensic evidence, narrowing down potential suspects. The method of killing further suggests that the perpetrator harbored a deep personal grievance or fixation with Beverly. So yeah, it had to be somebody that was strong, and they thought probably a large person.
Yep. Yeah, assuming that I would say that chances are chances are it I would lean slightly towards there being one killer, and if that's the case, then it definitely would be someone who was large and could just easily overpower her. But I will get into later on why there may have been more than one killer, or at least more than one person involved in this.
Okay. Let's see. Next is the mystery of the rope. The rope used to bind Beverly didn't come from her home, indicating the killer brought it with him, pointing to premeditation. The
Correct.
rope's origin became a significant focus of the investigation, as it demonstrated a level of planning and intent. Its presence also raises the question of how long the killer might have been stalking Beverly or preparing for the attack. Yeah, it was definitely premeditated,
No kidding.
and the killer did come prepared.
Yeah. Another thing to note is there this isn't like a this isn't like a big misconception, but people who are people who first hear about the case, they know that Beverly carried a letter opener with her, which is basically like a desktop, like a sharp desktop tool, and people have and she carried that because of the fact that she was being stalked. So people speculate that that may have been the murder weapon, but it was not. So whoever killed Beverly brought both the knife and the rope / clothesline with them. So yeah, both of those murder weapons were brought to the crime scene.
So did she carry the letter opener for protection to use as a knife if necessary?
Yes, but I do not believe she carried it outside with her. She just kept it at home. I think at home. Yeah, I think at home is actually where she was the most paranoid, especially when she was alone, which obviously makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look into the theory of a secret admirer. Detectives speculated that Beverly may have been killed by a secret admirer, given the anonymous gifts and hang-up calls she had received from time to time that year. This theory introduces the idea that Beverly's murder may have been motivated by unrequited love or obsession. The persistent phone calls and gifts indicate that someone had been fixated on her for months. You want to tell us more about that?
So, the presents that were left, they were left in the summer, okay. Basically, all of the incidents of stalking, they were all in the summer of 1964. So, in June, there were 2 presents left in the back door, which I mentioned that the family never used. It was like a ring and a bracelet. And then also in the summer, hang up phone calls started. So there were anywhere from 10 to 12 hang up phone calls a day, where whoever was calling the house hung up immediately after someone answered the phone. And 10 to 12 is like an exact number, because it was always either 10 or 11 or 12 phone calls a day, and that went on until a few weeks before the murder. And then there's also one. So the most disturbing stalking incident is when Beverly's father came home one night from work to find a man staring up at the attic bedroom window where Beverly shared with her younger sister Carol. And so it was dark outside, so Beverly's dad did not really get a good look at the man, but he got out of his car and chased the man for a block, but the man got away. And this was back in the summer as well.
Interesting. Okay, let's look at the role of Beverly's former boyfriends. Beverly's ex-boyfriends, including 18-year-old Roger McNamara, were questioned but ruled out after passing polygraph tests. Investigating Beverly's personal relationships was a logical step, but the lack of evidence connecting her ex-boyfriends to the crime demonstrates how little concrete information detectives had to work with. So were all the ex-boyfriends actually cleared?
So the thing is, Beverly, she went on dates with a lot of men, but there were only two steady boyfriends that she had throughout her life, and Roger was actually not an ex-boyfriend. He was her current boyfriend at the time of her murder. So he was polygraphed, and so there have been differing reports. So either he passed right away, or the first polygraph was inconclusive, and the second one he passed. So he was basically, like, there was nothing that really pointed at him, at least when it came to like the polygraph test and stuff like that. So he wasn't like so the thing is, one thing that I would like to mention is so like I spoke with the current lead detective on the Beverly Jarosz case on January 2nd, 2024 of this year. So like just under like literally a week shy of a year ago, basically. And so he mentioned to me that literally nobody from 1964 to now has been able to have been mathematically, scientifically cleared through DNA because of the DNA issue that they were having at the time, at least. So this would have been just under a year ago when I was on the phone with him. So assuming that because I know that there have been some recent updates in the case, which we'll go into later on. But like, if we're going by the information he gave me a year ago, everyone is still in play. And I know back in 1964, nobody was actually like conclusively cleared, but there were like people who were like just not thought to have been likely. And yeah, speaking basically when it comes to Roger, I honestly never thought that he was someone who I never thought he did it, and I don't think it's impossible that he did it, but I don't see I just don't see it. Like so Roger was like one of the like, so I mentioned there were two steady boyfriends that she had throughout her life, and Roger was the current one at the time of the murder, and her ex-boyfriend was Daniel Schulte, who was also the same age as Roger. They were both 3 years older than Beverly. So Daniel was 19, and he was quite the opposite of Roger. So Roger, he was like a steadfast Catholic conservative Republican, and he was just a very sophisticated young man. And Daniel, he was a greaser and a bad boy. He was known as a greaser and a bad boy in the social circles at the time, and he imitated. He was trying to imitate an actor named James Dean, who was like a cultural icon of social disillusionment. And Daniel Schulte was like a bad boy, and Beverly's earlier years were basically with him. They started hanging out and dating when I believe she was 14 and he was 17, and so this would have been around. I know that the summer after grade 8 / summer before grade 9 is when Daniel first started coming over. So yeah, this would have been around 1962, and or maybe even 1961. Yeah. They dated up until early 1963, I believe, or at least some point in 1963, and then and then Beverly met Roger through her best friend Margie, who was actually the girl who both Barbara and Beverly were supposed to go meet at Margie's house that day. So Margie was Roger's first cousin, and or Roger was Margie's first cousin, and so that's how Beverly met Roger, and they started dating in either April or May of 1964. So like earlier in the year before the murder occurred. And Beverly, when she was dating Daniel, and like just because like there was probably like at least a year break in between her breaking up with Daniel and getting with Roger. So when she was dating Daniel from summer after grade 8, which would have been which realistically would have been around 1962, up until basically like early 1964, she hung out with a very bad crowd, like a whole bunch of bad people, and a lot of them were honestly like worse than Daniel Schulte. And so that is something interesting of note. And I mentioned that while she had two steady boyfriends, there were a bunch of men she went on dates with, and she did go on like casual dates with a bunch of these other bad people. And a lot of these bad people are people who at least at one point in recent years were still looked at as persons of interest. And one of these guys who his name is William Burr. And okay, he is actually someone who
And we'll get into those later. Let's
okay.
Don't jump ahead there, okay?
Okay, no problem.
Okay. All right, let's look at the suspicions did turn to Barbara Klonowski. Yeah, anyway.
Barbara Klonowski.
Okay.
And,
Beverly's best friend became a target of rumors despite being cleared by detectives. This unjust suspicion highlights how desperate the community was for answers. Barbara's ordeal also reflects the darker side of public scrutiny, where grief is compounded by baseless accusations. Yeah, people were wanting to know what was going on there. And Barbara supposedly was the last person that seen her alive.
Yeah. So Barbara was, actually, so the thing is, like, assuming her story is true, she wouldn't have actually have seen Beverly alive because she was outside of the house. But Barbara is the only person who we know for a fact was at the property at the time of the murder, outside of obviously Beverly. And assuming someone else killed her, then outside of Beverly and whoever else and whoever killed Beverly, Barbara was the only known person at the property at the time. And her last name, it is pronounced Klonowski. And another thing, so Beverly's last name, Jarosz, it's also like I used to say Beverly Jarosz. Lots of people have said Jarosz or Jarosz, and I know that it's a Polish last name, and the Polish way to say it is Jarosz. But yeah, I just say Beverly Jarosz or Beverly Jarosz just because it's simpler.
Yeah, they both have it hard to say.
Yeah.
Let's look at the suicide of Lindley Bain.
Michael Lindley Bain, yeah.
Lindley Bain, a fellow high school student, took his life shortly after Beverly's murder, sparking rumors of his involvement. While Lindley's tragic death might seem suspicious, the lack of evidence linking him to the crime underscores the dangers of jumping to conclusions. His death added another layer of tragedy to an already heartbreaking case. What more do you know about that one?
So, some newspapers at the time, they actually referred to him by only his middle name, which was Lindley, and his last name, which was Bain. His first name was actually Michael, so his full name is Michael Lindley Bain. And he was just someone who had a lot of mental health issues. He was like, him and Beverly, they did not know each other. Like, they were not known to know, they were at the very least not known to know each other. They went to different schools, obviously, because Beverly was at an all-girls school. And he just had a whole lot of mental health issues. And another thing is, I did mention that obviously nobody from 1964 to now has been able to have been cleared conclusively, mathematically, scientifically through DNA. But Michael was working at the time at his grocery store job, and a whole bunch of his coworkers came forward and said and vouched for his alibi. So like, when it comes to all of the people who are thought to have done it from 1964 to now, he is one person who I can say, okay, even though he can't be cleared through DNA, it's like 99.5% chance that he is not the one who did it. Like, I won't say 100%, but just because I don't want to act like anything's impossible with a case as crazy as this. But yeah, like, this is the person who I'm most confident did not do this at all. Like, he's just someone who had a history of mental health issues. And the suicide, like, it's possible that here, because this was a horrific thing that happened to the community. So maybe just consuming all that negativity made his mental health issues worse, and that's why he did it. Or maybe it was just completely unrelated, and he was just he just couldn't take it anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Just a coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look into the false confession of William Rehard. Decades later, William Rehard confessed to Beverly's murder, but later took his own life, leaving detectives with no concrete evidence. False confessions muddy investigations and can mislead detectives. Rehard's confession underscores the complexity of cold cases where truth and deception often blur. So, what do you know about this William
Oh,
Rehard?
okay, so I was mentioning that Michael Lindley Bain was like the person who I'm most confident had nothing to do with this, but William Rehard, he is not even someone I look at as a suspect because the thing is, the stuff that's been put out about him over the years, like no one of actual no one of note, no one of actual credence has spoke about him. So basically, the son-in-law of like a Cleveland police officer. So like Garfield Heights is a suburb of Cleveland, and Garfield Heights Police Department is the local police station. And so Cleveland is like the capital city. So the Cleveland Police Department, like there was a detective there who and his son-in-law brought forward a story saying that that apparently his father-in-law said something to him about a boy named William Rehard who apparently confessed to this and then brought the father-in-law to like a locker to like a locker where he showed him the murder weapon and all that stuff. But I'll say it right now, that stuff is total bullshit. Like because Garfield Heights Police Department and Cleveland Police Department, they looked into these claims and all of it was completely unfound. So yeah, like we're basically starting off with like the least likely to like borderline impossible people right off the bat. But I will say that
Gotcha.
William Rehard, I did hear that he kidnapped an 8-year-old girl and held her for a few hours, but like she was released later on. So like I think like I'm not even sure if that part's true, but like I did hear that part about him as well. Just putting that out there.
Okay. Let's look at Detective Horrigan's dedication in this case, which is impressive. Retired Detective Captain William Horrigan continued to pursue leads until his death in 2004. Horrigan's unwavering commitment to the case reflects how deeply the tragedy affected those who worked on it. His inability to solve the crime serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring pain caused by unresolved cases. He was really old when he passed away, wasn't he?
Yep. He passed in 2004, and he was already a middle-aged man when this happened in 1964. So he would have been 90. He would have been 90, or at least around 90 in 2004 when he passed. So because he was already a middle-aged man 40 years before that. So yeah.
So he was almost still working on that case.
Yeah, and so okay, there's no question about his dedication, but I will say he seemingly did have tunnel vision. So I'm not sure if you read about this, but there was one suspect who he had his eye on, and every year on the anniversary of Beverly's murder, he would call this person. And he would continue to do so every year until this person finally started calling him first on the anniversary. And there's no yeah, and there's no confirmation as to who it was, but it's very likely that this person was the current boyfriend at the time, Roger McNamara, who we suspected. And the reason, so okay, Beverly's family and yeah, so Beverly's family, they basically said that yeah, we believe he thought it was Roger. And in a book called The Serial Killer's Apprentice, written by James Renner, who had access to he's a true crime author, and he had access to a partial piece of the Garfield Heights Police Department file on the case. And William Horrigan, it said that on the second day of the investigation, he had who he thought was a suspect, and he said that there are present elements to, there are elements to Roger's present story that bother some of us. So that's what he said. But I will say that again, Roger is he probably did not do it. So William Horgan, he seemed to have developed tunnel vision for him, and that actually might be a big reason as to why the case is not solved yet, and like why it's taken this long to get to where we're at now, basically. And yeah, I will say that when I spoke to the current lead detective on the case, and also the former lead detective on the case, like the most recent one, who they both they both pretty much said that Roger was not a suspect. They don't think Roger did it either. So I'll take that for what it's worth. But yeah, I would just like to put that out there.
Okay. Let's look at the impact on the Jarosz family. Beverly's parents and sister lived with the weight of her murder for decades. Their lives forever changed. The family's grief is a testament to the ripple effects of violent crime. Their fractured relationships and lingering pain emphasize the human cost of unresolved justice. Do you know if Beverly's parents and her sister are still alive?
No. So Beverly's sister is still alive. She was 4 years younger than Beverly at the time, so she would be 72 now. And Beverly's mother passed in 2018 at the age of 92, and her father passed in 2012 at the age of 90. So both of them had long lives, but they both passed on not knowing what happened to not knowing who killed their daughter. And so the younger sister is the only family member that's still like the only immediate family member that's still around today. And it does seem that there's some progress being made, so there is still hope and for like justice / closure, and because there is still one surviving family member left.
Okay, well, I'm sure she's had a rough life also.
No kidding.
Now let's look at the advances in forensics. It's been a while. The fingerprints and other evidence collected in 1964 were analyzed with limited technology, leaving room for hope in modern advancements. The potential for breakthroughs through DNA testing or modern forensic methods keep the case relevant and raises the possibility of justice even decades later. What do you think about the chances of that happening, Mahfouz? Do you think it'll actually make any difference?
Are you asking if I think like the DNA, like the advances in? Yeah. 100%, and that's because recently there's been some updates posted, and they've been using some very like top of the line labs to do some DNA work, and there's been some there's been some progress being made, and like when I spoke with the Garfield Heights Police Department lead detective, the current one on the case, back on January the 2nd of this year, he the reason I wanted to speak to him is because I had information that there were two well-known labs called Parabon Nanolabs and Othram Labs, and they both were willing to. They were both offering their services on the Beverly Jarosz case. Parabon Nanolabs, they have a very well-known DNA specialist. Her name is Cece Moore, and I think she spoke on behalf of Parabon. And so that's why I reached out to him. And then he explained to me that they were already using very comparable labs, and he actually spoke with Cece Moore in the past, but he did thank me for my help, and then we just spoke about a bunch of other things. But yeah, because of the recent updates that were posted, I can tell that they were definitely using very comparable labs, and that they've been able to move forward with work. So that is very promising. I was very happy to hear this.
So do they have any DNA from the scene?
I believe so. I won't say I don't want to say anything 100%, because okay, the last I knew, at least before the recent updates were posted, there was only a partial DNA profile to work with. So meaning that there was a partial DNA profile to pull from the scene, and a partial profile, it's better than nothing, but it's not enough, or at least at the time it wasn't enough to conclusively tie someone to the murder. There could be some things that you could do with it, test other people's DNA to see if if it kind of matches with the partial DNA, but like it still isn't like super reliable. Like it was better than nothing. But yeah, the thing is, with the recent updates that was posted, it mentioned surveillance being put on someone, so that would probably indicate that they have a DNA profile, or at least like because of the fact that surveillance is being used and they're using advanced labs, and they've been speaking to witnesses who they may not have spoken to in the past. Like all these things were listed when they posted their when Garfield Heights Police Department, when they posted their update. So yeah, like if I had to say yes or no, I would say yes, but I don't want to say with 100% certainty.
Okay, well, let's just hope something happens. Let's look at the unsolved mysteries here. Theories about Beverly's murder continue to circulate with no definitive resolution. The unsolved nature of this case invites speculation and keeps the story alive in public memory. This open-endedness highlights the challenges of solving cold cases. Go ahead now. Here's a good opportunity if you talk about those different suspects you want to talk about. Go ahead and talk about those.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot, but yeah, I'm ready for it. So, okay. So far, we have talked about. Okay, I know we've talked about like the two least likely ones, and like honestly, I'll say right now they're both pretty close to, if not borderline impossible. And those two were Michael Lindley Bain, the boy who committed suicide, and William Rehard, who the stuff being put out about him, it's just been completely unfound, and it's all just been rumor based. So yeah, we got those two out of the way, and so I will talk about I guess now I'll talk about pretty much yeah, like, because like the thing is, from 1964 to now, there have been at least like I'm looking at and this list, because I compiled a list, and this list does have both their names on it, but I'm sure that neither Michael Lindley Bain or William Rehard did it, but I just put them on the list just for the sake of just for the sake of the case, I guess, or just for the sake of like talking about them. But yeah, so including those two, the list has 18 people, and yeah, I will get into the rest of them now. So the first guy I'll talk about is James Modulewski. So he was the 18-year-old young man who drove Beverly home from her grandma's around noon of the day of her murder. So Beverly and her sister Carol, around 10:30, they arrived at their grandmother's house to have lunch, and then Beverly had to leave later on to go meet up with Barbara and Margie because they had plans that day. So Beverly left her grandma's house around noon, and so James Modulewski, he was an 18-year-old, but he was still living at home, and his parents, Sonia and Johnny Modulewski, saw that his parents, their names were Sonia and Johnny Modulewski, and his mom Sonia saw that, and they were neighbors of Beverly's grandparents. So his mom Sonia saw Beverly walking to the nearby bus stop to take the bus home. When she saw this, she asked James to drive Beverly home, as it was super cold out, being winter and all. Like, it was December 28th, and even though there was no snow, it was as cold as it could get for winters, as it could be for winter. So yeah, that is like obviously seeing Beverly there, she would have asked her son, who was coming home from a job interview at that time, to just drop him off home quickly before to just drop Beverly off home quickly before coming back home. And so, because of how often Beverly visited her grandparents, who lived about a mile or two away from her house, she was obviously likely familiar enough with James Modulewski to get in his car with him alone. James Modulewski said it took 15 minutes to drive Beverly home, and so she was dropped off shortly before 12:30, around 12:25. And so after he dropped Beverly off home, James returned home, and he changed his clothes because he was coming home from a job interview. So after his mom told him to drop Beverly off home, he arrived home, changed his clothes, and he had lunch. he like James mentioned that when he dropped Beverly off at her house, he did not go inside the house or stick around to chat with Beverly after dropping her off. He just dropped her off in the driveway and then went straight home. So yeah, he pulled into the driveway to drop her off, went straight home, and yeah, I mentioned he was just coming home from a job interview. So as James and his parents were neighbors of Beverly's grandma, whose name was Marie Vanek, he drove Beverly's grandma, Marie Vanek, to the Jarosz household later in the evening to be with the family afterwards, as his mom, Sonia, asked James Monjaleski to drive Beverly's grandmother over to the Jarosz house later in the day, later, like in the evening. And because James was the last person to see Beverly alive outside of her killer, Garfield Heights Police Department brought James up in the room to show James Beverly's body in the crime scene, to see James' reaction and like gauge and like see like engage like to see like what his reaction would be, to see, hey, does this guy know something, could he have done it? And they did not see anything out of the ordinary in his character. So while he was not able to have been conclusively ruled out then or now, at least as of 1 year ago, he was still thought to have not done it based on his reaction, because he had the same reaction anyone would have had seeing that horrific scene. So he was pretty much ruled out without being conclusively cleared. And he's still alive today currently, and he is an eye doctor in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then the next person I'll talk about is Larry Young. So Garfield Heights Police Department questioned Larry Young, whose mother, Stella Young, badmouthed Beverly after she either rejected Larry or dumped Larry after dating Larry for a bit. So there have been differing reports as to whether Larry was legitimately like dating Beverly or if he was just simply infatuated with her. But like what is known for a fact is that Larry was heartbroken over Beverly, and Larry's mother, Stella Young, hated Beverly. And so there's this man named Robert who's like, apparently his parents were family friends of Stella Young and her husband. And according to Robert, his parents said that Stella was mentally deranged, and Robert claimed that Larry's dad, who is Stella's husband, told Robert's dad that Stella killed Beverly. But it's hard to believe that not only would Larry's dad sell out his wife, but that Robert's parents wouldn't come forward with this information as well. But either way, both Stella Young and Larry Young were obviously like pretty much ruled out without being conclusively cleared because of the DNA issue. And then yeah, so like yeah, basically who I've been speaking about so far, I don't think any of these theories are very likely. And then there is there is a priest named John Schnittenberg who there's something called like a Master Detective magazine, and he like there was something written about him, or at least something written about a priest who was counseling Beverly at the time. And so his name, or at least the name of a priest, came up over the years. And because of what was said about a priest counseling Beverly. And so the thing is, Beverly's sister, she appeared on a podcast in like 2016, and she explained that John Schnittenberg was actually, or at least like according to her, at least John Schnittenberg was a priest who came into the family, who came into the scene after the murder. The family apparently did not know him before the murder, but John Schnittenberg, he was from the same hometown as Beverly's father. And so this is something that was very odd. And Beverly's sister was basically saying that like this would sound very odd unless you were like Catholic, but even then I still think this would just be odd regardless. But yeah, so John Schnittenberg, he had like a ridiculous, so he kept a picture of Beverly in his wallet, and he kept it with him at all times. And he also had like tons of copies of her photos printed out, and he would apparently distribute them to people. And like Beverly's sister was basically saying, as I mentioned, she was saying that if you're not Catholic, you may find this weird, but apparently Beverly reminded him of like some sort of saint, and that's why he kept this. That's why he did all this stuff, like distributing her photos around and then keeping a photo of Beverly with him in his wallet, apparently reminding him of someone of some girl named Maria Goretti, who was stabbed, who was also stabbed by someone who was pursuing killing her. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. It is very strange, but John Schnittenberg apparently didn't pan out. And like the thing is, I definitely find all this stuff interesting, but like there's just so many other much more likely people to have done it that I don't really think he did it either. And so after John Schnittenberg, there is James Krozak or Krachik. But yeah, so he was a middle-aged man, and he so like reporters interviewed this middle-aged man who lived on the same street as Beverly and the Jarosz family. So he was a middle-aged neighbor, and his name was James Krachik, and he claimed to have seen a man running down the Jarosz driveway around 1:45 p.m. So this would have been around maybe 20 minutes after Barbara arrived and heard the noise, according to Barbara at least. But yeah, so James Krachik, he was home at the time because of because his job, which was it was at a place called White Motor. They were on strike, and his wife confirmed to journalists that he often stood by the window, looking towards Beverly's house, saying, "quote unquote." Sometimes he even gets up at night to look out the window. I guess he likes the view. So this is obviously very strange.
Before or after her murder?
Before. So, yeah, like I know that at the very least this was happening before. I'm not sure if he did it after, but I know this was happening before. So, because they interviewed him not long after Beverly's murder, but yeah. So James Krachik later admitted to police that he made up this story to get his name in the paper, and so this is obviously very odd that he said something and then recanted and said that he just did this to get himself in the paper. But something that is notable is his child. His child, and I believe his child's name was James as well, if I'm not mistaken. But his child did work with Beverly's ex-boyfriend Daniel Schulte at a car wash. And but the child was younger than Daniel. Daniel was 3 years older than Beverly. So yeah, the child was younger than Daniel. But because Beverly hung out there, the Krachik child, so James Krachik's son knew her, and his name has come up over the years as well. And then obviously we get to the ex-boyfriend Daniel Schulte, who I was speaking a bit about before. And so yeah, he was Beverly's 19-year-old ex-boyfriend at the time, who was considered a bad boy ex and a greaser in the teen circles of the time. Daniel and Beverly hung out when he was 17 and she was 14, but they were not allowed to formally date because Beverly's parents didn't allow it because he was a bad boy. So unlike a lot of boys who Beverly went out with, Daniel was a steady boyfriend. I mentioned that she had 2 steady boyfriends throughout her life, and Daniel's idea of a date was making out behind the car wash. So he dropped out of high school in grade 10 and enlisted in the Air Corps, but he was back in town for Christmas. And although he was dating a new girl by this time, it was known that he still pined for Beverly. And Beverly's friends were chagrined because they thought Daniel was a bad influence. Margie, who was Beverly's best friend, and yeah, I did want to mention quickly that Barbara Klonowski, she actually was not Beverly's best friend. Margie Gorney, whose real name is Mary Margaret Gorney, she was Beverly's best friend. They went to elementary school together, and Barbara was actually a newer friend to the friend group at the time. Like Barbara met them in early high school, but like she recently joined their friend group in 11th grade. So yeah, Beverly's best friend.
Some people think maybe that Barbara was jealous of that friendship?
Jealous, yes, but I'm not sure about the friendship specifically. Like it's not impossible, but I do think jealousy is very possible. But I'm not sure if it was that specific friendship that Barbara was jealous of. But yeah, I did want to put out that Margie, whose real name is Mary Margaret, Margie Gorney, Mary Margaret Gorney, she was actually Beverly's best friend, and she told Garfield Heights Police Department that Beverly would not have ever thought of doing the things with Roger, her current boyfriend at the time, who was also Margie's cousin. So she would never have thought of doing the things with Roger that she did with Daniel. And so she said, quote unquote, Beverly would never have thought of doing the things with Roger that she did with Daniel. And yeah, I mentioned that Daniel Schulte hung out with the rough greaser crowd trying to imitate James Dean, who was an American actor in the 1950s, being remembered as a cultural icon of disillusionment and social estrangement. So Carol, yeah, so Beverly's sister Carol said that Beverly broke her relationship with Daniel when she was in 10th grade, but there's a true crime author named James Badal who studied this case extensively, and he said that Daniel was Beverly's boyfriend up until about March of 1963, which is when Beverly was in ninth grade. And I believe that James Badal's account, the author's account, is actually accurate over the sister, just because the sister's memory over the years, it's gone a bit foggy. She's said stuff that have proven to have been inaccurate, and like I get it, because like she's getting up there in age, and also because this case is just taking a toll on her, so that would make sense. But yeah, regardless, Daniel took the breakup hard, and he was sending flowers, an Easter basket, letters, and showing up at Beverly's all-girls Catholic school after class. So Daniel claimed to have been working when Beverly was killed, and he showed a time card supporting his claim. However, his next door neighbor claims to have seen Daniel arrive home in a hurry that day. When she was in her garage, she saw Daniel out of the garage arriving home in a hurry, according to her. So Daniel was given, Daniel associated with a group of other bad people at the time, and he showed up at Beverly's viewing with a girl at his side. So the girl he was dating at that time, even though he still pined for Beverly, he was with another girl. So he showed up with this girl at his side. But later on, he returned alone, and he sat quietly by himself. So while on leave from the Air Corps, Daniel had picked up some part-time work, and like I said, he produced a time card that showed he was on the clock when Beverly was murdered. So and like I mentioned, the woman who lived next door to Daniel told Garfield Heights Police Department that she had seen Daniel come home that day and run inside in a hurry, and she watched Daniel in the reflection of her garage window. So he was also given a lie detector test, just like Roger McNamara, because of this, and he did pass the lie detector test. But yeah, obviously, like first and foremost, polygraph tests, lie detector tests, then and now, especially back then, junk science. So yeah, so it's notable that now that the tests in 1964 were not as reliable as they are today, and even today they're not admissible in court for a reason. So yeah, and then also in more recent years, around 2005, 1 year after the case was reopened, Daniel Schulte refused to talk with police, and he actually moved to Israel. And so in the 2010s, Beverly's sister Carol said she wrote Daniel an email thanking him for sponsoring Beverly's page on the website called Find a Grave. And then Daniel wrote Carol a very, very nice note after. Like the thing is, Carol did not like Daniel back when Beverly and Daniel were dating, but like when they started talking in the 2010s, fast forward like 50 years later, like it seemed that she was very touched by this nice note that he wrote. So and then like they did exchange a few emails since the 50th anniversary of her death, which would have been 10 years ago now. And so because of this, people did wonder if she was being easy on him at the time and trying to give him a pass. But like she did confirm on an episode shortly after that she did not give Daniel a pass at all. So she contacted Daniel after she contacted Daniel to thank him for sponsoring Beverly's Find a Grave, she gave the most recent lead detective at the time, who she was friends with, named Carl Bagacki, she gave him Daniel's email address, and Carl had a few questions he wanted to ask Daniel, but Daniel did not reply to Carl Bagacki. So Carol, Beverly's sister, pleaded with Daniel a couple times via email, asking Daniel to communicate with Carl, but Daniel did not reply. So the aforementioned above, as well as the fact that Daniel did leave the country shortly after the Beverly Jarosz case was reopened in 2004, it kept Daniel on Carol's list at the time of the 52nd anniversary of Beverly's murder. So this was 2016, which when Daniel was still considered to be on the list. But then fast forward to July 2021, around like just under 5 years later, Carol seemingly changed her mind on Daniel, as she said that in a podcast episode in July 2021, that she only really gave credence to two people, or at least was only willing to talk about two people, and neither one of the people she named were Daniel Schulte. I'll get into those two people later on, but yeah, it seems that she for some reason does not think Daniel is too likely now. And I will say for me personally, Daniel is a very likely suspect. He's not my top suspect, but out of everyone we spoke about, he'd be my third most likely suspect, or at least like my third most likely theory. And but I will say that it's very possible that him not talking with Garfield Heights Police Department in recent years and him moving to Israel could just be because he wanted a fresh start and to get away from the case, as he was still clearly hurting over Beverly at the time, regardless of whether he did it or not. And another thing I will say is in 2020, there were rumors that he passed away, but there was no death notice, no death certificate present. No one could find any proof of his death. So it's not known whether he's actually alive or not still. So if he is still alive, that would mean he faked his death, and that would be very interesting. But yeah, I guess I spoke all I guess that's all I'd speak on about Daniel right now. And then there's Roger McNamara, who I mentioned was the current boyfriend at the time of the murder. So yeah, same age as Daniel Schulte, and he met Beverly through his cousin Margie, Beverly's best friend. And Margie and Roger's moms worked at a bank, and he was described as a straight-laced conservative college student having very strict moral attitudes. So yeah, he was quite the opposite of Beverly's ex-boyfriend Daniel Schulte. And yeah, he was studious and religious and was well liked by the Jarosz family. He was a Republican, and he attended Latin Mass and spoke out against the liberal alterations of Vatican II. So Carol, who never cared for Daniel, liked Roger as Roger treated her well, and Beverly particularly enjoyed attending parties at Roger's fraternity and meeting Roger's older educated friends. Roger and Beverly did have long-term plans. He would take Beverly to the museum and the music carnival, and he was due to take Beverly to Winter Formal, and he claimed to have been homesick working on his car when Beverly was killed. And Garfield Heights Police Department did consider his alibi weak, or at least some of them did, including the lead detective at the time, which I did mention, even though the current lead detective and the most recent lead detective do not consider Roger likely. But yeah, I did want to mention that. And yeah, so Roger's car was blue, and he loved to keep it clean, and he was given a polygraph also, which he passed. So yeah, like I mentioned, it's not known whether he passed right away or whether the first was inconclusive and then he passed the second one, but either way, he did end up passing. So yeah, and then I did mention that the current lead detective at the time said to Cleveland Press that, quote unquote, like shortly after the murder, he said, quote unquote, there are some elements to Roger's present story that bother us, that bother some of us. And Roger was at a Christmas party at the Jarosz family's house the previous night on the 27th. So like exactly 60 years from now, 60 years ago from now, he was at a party at the Jarosz household, and it was and him and Beverly did go out at some point, but like according to Beverly's sister Carol, they were all lovey-dovey that day, so it does seem unlikely that they'd be on bad terms the following day. And yeah. And yeah, like I was saying about in the Daniel Schulte entry, lie detector tests, polygraph tests in 1964 were not nearly as reliable as they are today, and even today they are inadmissible in court because they're like it is ultimately just junk science. Like they are a useful tool, but they don't really actually mean anything, because like anyone with nerves could could fail a polygraph test. But yeah, Roger. Yeah, he did end up passing a polygraph test. And so yeah, and I did mention to you that Beverly's sister Carol said she couldn't know for sure, but she does believe that Roger was the lead detective, William Horrigan's top suspect, so much so that Horrigan only focused on Roger. And he believed that something happened when so William Horrigan, the original lead detective who developed tunnel vision on apparently Roger, he believed that something happened when on the 27th of December 1964, which led to the events the next day. And so yeah, that would point even more to him thinking that it was Roger and developing tunnel vision for Roger. And Beverly's sister Carol did say that Roger maintained contact with Beverly's mom Eleanor throughout the year. So Eleanor passed in 2018, and it was in 2016 when Carol said that Roger did maintain contact with the mom Eleanor. So at some point Roger got married, had children, then got divorced, and he worked for a bunch of financial firms over the years, and supposedly had or still has a nasty demeanor. And Roger remains a steadfast Republican and Catholic, and he was living in Northeast Ohio in 2008 when James Renner tried, the author James Renner tried to go interview him. But nowadays, he appears to be living in Silverdale, Washington now. It turns out that William Horrigan was most likely wrong, as Roger was pretty much ruled out by Garfield Heights Police Department in recent years. So yeah, I mentioned that both the former lead detective Carl Bagacki, who had a ton of dedication to the case and was who was a close friend of Beverly's sister, and the current lead detective who I spoke with, they both said that Roger was either not a suspect at all, or at least not a likely suspect, and obviously he couldn't have been conclusively cleared because of the DNA issue. But like yeah, this was just under a year ago when I spoke to the current lead detective on it. So assuming that the DNA stuff is legit now, that would probably point, like assuming that there's like a full profile now, or at least like enough DNA to match to someone, that would probably point even more away from Roger than before. Now that they actually have, now that they actually presumably have a DNA profile. So yeah, that is all I have to say about Roger. And now we'll go on to John Palian, or John Palian. Some people say Palian, some people say Palian. I'll just say Palian. But yeah, John Palian was Beverly's 18-year-old neighbor who lived 2 houses east of the Jarosz household. So he went to St. Therese Elementary School with Beverly, as Beverly's high school was obviously all girls, but yeah, but the elementary school, it was like co-ed. So he went to the same elementary school with Beverly, although he was 2 3 years older. So he may have been 19, but yeah, he was either 18 or 19 at the time. But yeah, he was older by 2 or 3 years. So they did not really know each other at elementary school, or like at all, even though they were like neighbors. But yeah, John Palian's dad fixed TVs, and his dad's name was also John Palian. So John Palian Sr. fixed TVs, and John Palian Sr. came over to the Jarosz household a couple of times to fix TV tubes. So yeah, so this suspect's dad came over to the Beverly's house a couple of times to fix TV tubes. So John Palian was stated to, John Palian Jr. was stated to have an eye for Beverly by neighbors, and he even admit that he would spy on Beverly sunbathing in her backyard during the summer months. He was also home alone at the time, so there was no one who can actually vouch for him and give him an alibi. He was stated by classmates to be shy, so it is possible that he was the one who left the anonymous gifts for Beverly because he couldn't muster the courage to speak to her directly. And another thing is, he lived in close proximity, and to this day, and back then as well, there are no fences separating the backyard, so it would have been very easy for a neighbor like him to have done it. He's not the only one who could have done it, obviously. Like there are others who I'll talk about later on who could have been the one to have left the gifts, and even Daniel Schulte who gave gifts. Like it's not impossible that he could have been the one to leave the gifts. But yeah, like John Palian did live very close, and he was shy, so that is something that's notable. And so yeah, like I mentioned, there were no fences separating his backyard from so like he lived 2 doors east. So in between the Jarosz family and the Palian family, there lived the Zemgulis family. So yeah, there were no fences separating John's backyard from the Zemgulis families or Beverly's families. So leaving the gifts would be of low to no difficulty. And then John Palian actually did not pass the lie detector test, as it was inconclusive. And according to a coworker, he was asking how to pass one. So the thing is, he was stated to be a shy guy, and obviously, like when you're being polygraphed, your nerves will act up, and that could mess up the test. So like it being inconclusive, it really doesn't actually mean anything. And even if he failed, like because he was said to be because he was just said to be a shy guy, it wouldn't have meant a ton. But yeah, it was inconclusive. And so at some point, Detective Carl Bagacki, like the former lead detective, the most recent one, he considered that it could have been John Palian looking up at Beverly's window in the summer of 1964 when Beverly's dad saw someone looking up at the window. Like the former lead detective Carl Bagacki did consider it could have been John Palian, as he admitted that he'd watched Beverly sunbathing from his bedroom window. And John Palian married a psychologist at some point, and he was contacted by the crime author James Renner, who I mentioned to you, in 2008. And John Palian told James Renner that any requests for an interview should go through John Palian's lawyer named Jay Milano, who was a high-profile lawyer at the time. So John Palian told James Renner that Garfield Heights Police Department spoke recently to him, and John Palian said that he was being framed and there was a cover-up going on. And I will get into this part later on. But yeah, so remember this, that he said that Palian told the author James Renner that he was being framed and that there was a cover-up going on. And so additionally, John Palian's sister was approached by Garfield Heights Police Department at work, was questioned for over an hour, and she lawyered up. Garfield Heights Police Department wanted to know if she disposed of the knife for her brother. But a big thing that always pointed away from Palian is that Beverly most likely would not have opened the door for him, and because the thing is, she was being stalked and she was paranoid to the point where like she literally locked her parents out of the house, or at least one of her parents out of the house at one point. And so because she was the type to lock her doors, and she like, even though they lived close and went to the same elementary school at one point, like they were not in the same social circles. He was a very shy outcast. She was a very outgoing social girl, and they just did not like they did not know each other. Like the family were not familiar with him at all, and Beverly and him did not know each other. Like he was just like someone who was watching from a distance. And yeah, it's hard to see Beverly being comfortable with John being in the house, as she was skeptical of men and knew she had a stalker. And moreover, John Palian was also said to be a sissy by those that knew him. And I even spoke to someone who even said the same thing about him. And so so I did speak with James Renner in 2021, and he said that John Palian was his pick back when he wrote the book in 2008. But Carl Bagacki spoke to James Renner since then, and so Carl Bagacki, the former lead detective, the most recent one, and Garfield Heights Police Department, they pretty much ruled John Palian out in recent years, even though they couldn't conclusively clear him at the time. So yeah, just like with Roger, they pretty much ruled him out, like without being able to conclusively do it. Like they don't think he did it. I will say, when I first and yeah, but yeah, because of them pretty much ruling Palian out, the author James Renner, who originally thought Palian did it, he also does not think Palian did it any longer. But what I will say is, when I first started looking into this case in March 2021, John Palian, like after reading all this stuff about him, I actually thought like he was actually my top pick for a very brief point in time. But then later on, after learning more stuff about more people and then looking more objectively into him, because I admittedly developed a little bit of bias after reading this. But yeah, like later on, I'm like, yeah, this guy probably did not do it. And I will say that, yeah, when it comes to everyone we've talked about so far, he is more likely than a few, like a few of the really bad, like a few of the really like unlikely to impossible ones. But yeah, I don't think he's very likely. I think he's like on the list of all the suspects. I'd say he'd be somewhere in the middle. And like there's a lot of suspects among you. So yeah, like out of the people we spoke about so far, Daniel Schulte is definitely more likely than John Palian, to me at least, to have done it out of everyone I spoke to so far. But everyone else that I've spoke about so far up to this point, I don't see them as very likely. And now I'll talk about Bruce Bielek. So some people say his last name is Bielek, and some people say it's Bilek. But yeah, Bruce Bernard Bilek. I'll just say Bilek. So he was a 21-year-old college student at the time, and he was living almost directly behind the Jarosz household in 1964. So so the house that was directly behind the Jarosz household, Bruce lived one door one door west of that. So yeah, so the Jarosz family knew Bruce Bielek better than they knew John Palian, because as like they were both neighbor boys, or they both lived close to the Jarosz family. But yeah, they knew Bruce better than they knew John, because they saw Bruce working all the time at the library, and Beverly and Carol, her sister Carol, they'd go to the library and see Bruce all the time. And Bruce also went to the same church as that the Jarosz family went to. And there were a couple times when Beverly went to later church service than both Carol and Beverly's mom Eleanor, and Bruce would drive Beverly home. So Bruce and Beverly were not only better acquainted than Beverly was with John Palian, but Bruce and Beverly were clearly quite familiar with one another. And Bruce claimed to have been in his garage working on his car, which was supported by his parents. He could have had a potential line of sight of Beverly getting dropped off by James Mongelewski, the grandma's neighbor, depending on if Bruce's garage door was open, or if he was outside of his garage when Beverly got dropped off. Because like his backyard, his garage, it had a clear view of Beverly's side of the side of the Beverly Jarosz's house. So like if his garage yeah, so the garage, it did not have like a window, I don't believe. So he would have had to have either been outside of his garage, or yeah, either outside of his garage, or the garage door would have had to have been open for him to have been able to see Beverly getting dropped off. And it is notable that Bruce became an art teacher at a high school afterwards, and he reportedly asked female students to pose in bikinis and even nude so he could take photos of them. And he made at least a couple of his female students uncomfortable. And I've actually spoke with one of these students that he taught back in 1970 at Garfield Heights High School. And so yeah, I spoke with one of these people, and she spoke about how uncomfortable Bruce made her. And then Bruce also made a student's assistant so uncomfortable that she left her job. He also did teach at Cuyahoga Community College later on, around like the 1980s, I think. And he was just said to have been, yeah, he was just like, there were allegations of his behavior against women following him for a lot of his life.
A lot of people would suspect him.
Yeah. Like outside of Daniel Schulte, the ex-boyfriend, Bruce, so far out of everyone I listed, he is definitely the most likely to me out of everyone I listed so far. Like Bruce would be fourth most likely suspect on my list out of all of them, or at least the fourth most likely theory. But yeah, so there was some sort of joke going on in Beverly's friend circle where Beverly was teased about Bruce having the hots for her. Bruce was questioned after Garfield Heights Police Department saw a note Beverly had written to Margie. Beverly's note said, quote unquote, Bruce came over to see what I look like when I'm not dressed. I have my blue robe on and my hair is still in curlers. So after Garfield Heights Police Department questioned him after this information was given, Bruce said he didn't really ever talk to Beverly, which obviously was not true, and his alibi was considered solid as his parents alibied him, so Bruce was never given a polygraph. It is notable, however, that parents would usually protect their children even if they think or know that their child is guilty. Additionally, Bruce's parents definitely could not have been keeping an eye on him the whole time because they were in the house doing stuff, so that is also noteworthy. So yeah, Bruce is definitely and like I will get into like parents alibying their children as something to not take super seriously later on in another entry. But yeah, like yeah, when it comes to Bruce, he is someone who just like John Palian was my top, like Bruce at one point for a short period of time, he was my top suspect. Yeah, so Bruce and John Palian and Daniel Schulte back in 2021 at different points, or and early 2022, they were all at brief points in time top suspects of mine. But yeah, I'd say that Bruce is fourth most likely on my list, and Daniel Schulte is third most likely on my list of all these of all the suspects that I have so far. I'm still going to get into the more likely ones later on, but yeah, out of everyone I spoke about so far, Bruce Balek and Daniel Schulte. So Bruce Balek, the creepy neighbor who lived behind her, and then Daniel Schulte, the ex-boyfriend. They are the people who stand out so far out of the people I listed. And now, okay, and now I'll get on to Harry Joseph Maydal. So Harry Joseph Maydal was a 17-year-old door-to-door salesman who moved to Garfield Heights in September 1964, which was 3 months before Beverly's murder. So before I get into it, I will say that because he moved on September 24th, 1964, just like 3 months and 4 days before her murder. Like some people think that's interesting, but the way I look at it is he moved after all the stalking incidents, which all of which were in the summer. So the anonymous gifts, the hang-up phone calls 10 to 12 times a day, and Beverly's dad coming home to see someone look up at the house. All this happened in the summer before Harry Maydal moved to Garfield Heights. So Harry's parents were so yeah, I just wanted to get that out of the way before I start talking about him. But yeah, Harry Maydal's parents were divorced by the time he was 5 years old, and yeah, his father lived in Michigan, and Harry's mother's house, which was on East 141st Street in Garfield Heights, was a 15-minute walk from the Jarosz house. So Harry Maydal, before moving to Garfield Heights, Ohio, with his mom, like before moving to his mom's house, he lived in Michigan, as that's where his father lived, and so yeah, he was in Michigan before that, before moving to Garfield Heights. But yeah, Harry lived at his mom's house, like at the time of Beverly's murder, he lived at his mom's house right off McCracken Road on East 141st Street, which was around a mile from Beverly's school Marymount and around a mile away from the Jarosz house, give or take for both. Harry was violent by age 2 and accused of breaking and entering at age 9. Harry was out of 17 behavioral institutions and schools by age 17. After moving to Garfield Heights in September 1964, he started working at Hallie's department store in Cleveland, where the Jarosz family did shop at here and there. And Harry also worked at a place called Burroughs on Southgate. Because he moved to Garfield Heights at the end of September 1964, as I mentioned, none of the stalking could have been him, obviously, because he moved after all the stalking happened. And so at the time of the stalking, so all the anonymous gifts, all the hang up phone calls, and then the Beverly's dad seeing a guy looking up at the window, at the time of all this stuff in the summer, Harry was living in Michigan, which is like where his father lived, and during the summer he was actually in a reformatory school for hardcore juvenile sex offenders during the summer of 1964. So he had just got released from there at the time of his move to Garfield Heights. So yeah, as I mentioned, the anonymous gifts couldn't have been from him because the box with the bracelet addressed to Beverly was left in June, and then the hang-up calls were also in the summer, and Harry would not have been the one to make them. And yeah, Beverly's dad Thaddeus. So some people call him Ted for short, but his real name is Thaddeus. So Thaddeus saw the man looking up at the window of Beverly's bedroom in the summer as well. Unlike most, the great majority of the other people who were thought to have done it, who Beverly was actually acquainted with. Unlike all these other people, the main argument for Harry Maydal possibly being the killer was just simply that he had a violent criminal record. Because like him and Beverly were not known to have known each other. Like the only thing that made Harry stand out in this case is that he has a violent criminal record. So Harry attacked 3 women at knife point in 1963 before moving to Garfield Heights. By age 17, Harry had raped his stepmother and threatened to kill his half siblings. And the reason Harry was actually sent to the reformatory,
He raped his stepmother and then threatened to kill her.
yeah. So by age 17, which was the age he was at the time of the murder, he had raped his stepmother and threatened to kill his half siblings. So
Wow.
And the reason he was sent to the reformatory school for hardcore juvenile sex offenders, which is where he was, which was in Michigan, where he was at the time when all the stalking started. And the reason he was sent to this reform school was because of the sexual assault of his stepmother. So obviously, having assaulted his stepmother, he's not going to move back in with his dad. So that's why he moved to Garfield Heights to be with his mom. So then, Harry just Maydal stabbed a pregnant housewife named Gerda Leedy on February 16, 1965, a little over a month and a half after Beverly's murder. So Gerda Leedy's husband was an Elyria radio broadcaster. So Elyria is another town that is close to Cleveland. So it's not too far from Garfield Heights in Cleveland, but it was close enough to Cleveland to where when Cleveland detectives found Harry after he stabbed Gerda Leedy, he was at the Embassy Apartments at Prospect Avenue in a closet hiding. So Cleveland detectives were also working on the Beverly Jarosz case, and they noticed that Harry had 3 scars on him, 2 on his face, and a 2-inch scar on his wrist. According to Beverly's sister Carol, Harry could not account for his whereabouts between 12 p.m. and 5 p.m. on December 28, 1964. And she said this in a podcast in 2016. And at the time, Harry was actually her top suspect when she was saying this. But she mentioned that.
Very interesting.
I agree. And so she mentioned that so her story it is different from what the paper said, because the papers did say that that Harry was at Hallie's department at the time. So there are differing stories as to whether Harry had an alibi or not. But so I will say that in 2016, when Carol did those podcasts, when Beverly's sister Carol did those podcasts, Joseph Maydal was her number 1 top pick. But after appearing on the second podcast in 2021 that I mentioned, Harry Maydal was no longer her top suspect. He was bumped down to number 2. So I will put that out there as well. But so Harry could not account for his whereabouts between. According to Carol, he could not account for his whereabouts in between noon and 5 p.m. on the day of the murder. Although in the papers it said that he was working at Hallie's that day. So this is another thing. Harry, quote unquote, confessed to Beverly's murder, then recanted it. So when the lead detective at the time, William Horrigan, the one who did develop tunnel vision for Roger McNamara, the current boyfriend at the time, when Detective William Horrigan and some other Garfield Heights Police Department detectives start speaking to Harry after Harry, quote unquote, confesses, Harry was giving a totally different layout of the house, as well as giving different times and different things that happened at Beverly's. The knife used to stab Gerda Leedy, the pregnant housewife 2 months after Beverly's murder, it was that knife that was used to stab her. It was also smaller than the one used to stab Beverly. Harry did not give anything consistent with what really happened. When asked about why Harry confessed, Harry said, quote unquote, because William Horrigan and the other guys in the room, they're like, why are you telling us you did it? And then after hearing his quote unquote confession, after he gave like different times and different things that happened at Beverly, they're like, why are you telling us you did it? And then when asked about why he confessed, Harry said, quote unquote, because you guys are going to pin it on me anyway. And now obviously this guy was a very horrible person, no doubt about it, and there are a lot of interesting things that do admittedly kind of point to him, but as looking objectively, I can see that if a person was to do a violent crime, and then if a person was to do a stabbing a couple months after the stabbing and strangulation murder of a girl nearby, I could assume, it's reasonable to assume that the law enforcement at the time, they were desperate to solve the case, and I guess he just assumed that the crime would be pinned on him. So and also he didn't move after all the stalking happened too. So if I was to be fair, if I was to be objective about it, I could potentially see that like I could potentially see like the because like the quote unquote because you guys are gonna pin it on me anyway, knowing how like because especially because Garfield Heights Police Department, they historically have been at the very least been rumored to have been corrupt. So yeah, like I can see why he said I can like assuming he did not do it, I could see his mindset in and thinking, okay, this is gonna be pinned on me anyway. I'll just fucking I'll just like go along with it and just make something up. Like I could hypothetically see that, but like it is just very weird. And so he took 4 polygraphs regarding Beverly, and all 4 polygraphs were inconclusive. So there was a known polygraph expert at the time named Lee Teeters, and he administered the polygraph. And yeah, like yeah, that is just something else that apparently was of note. But yeah, his name was Lee Teeters, and he administered the polygraph. But yeah, Harry Madoff's fingerprints were also inconclusive. So yeah, he gave DNA. So like he gave fingerprints and he took polygraphs, and yeah, so when Harry Madoff, Harry Madoff, his fingerprints, just like the polygraphs, were also inconclusive. And the most recent lead detective on the case, Carl Bagacki, he said that when Garfield Heights Police Department polygraphed Harry and he was inconclusive and the fingerprints were inconclusive, he also said, quote unquote, but I also got a handful of other people that were inconclusive on both parts too. So like he basically was also giving his opinion that while Harry Madoff was interesting to him, Harry Madoff was not his top pick. And he actually he actually spoke about like him and Beverly's sister Carol currently have the same top pick. Like Beverly's sister Carol has the same top pick as the Garfield Heights Police Department. Like she has the same top pick as them. She used to think it was Harry, but now he's bumped down to number 2 in favor of her top pick now, who I will get into later on. But yeah, the original lead detective at the time in 1964, William Horgan, he had 72 hours to link Harry Madoff to the Beverly Jarosz slaying, as he had to return Harry Madoff to the Elyria police to stand trial for the Gertrude stabbing. And he decided that it was plenty of time to determine that Harry Madoff didn't do it. And the papers stated that William Horgan said, quote unquote, the man arrested outside Elyria, which was referring to Harry Madoff, was probably not important in the case. And Horgan said to reporters, quote unquote, if I thought he was a hot suspect, I would have gone out last night. And so on February 17, 1965, which was the day after he stabbed Gertrude, the Akron Beacon Journal posted about Harry Madoff. They said that Harry got arrested in Cleveland the day of publishing, and that the journal said that Harry Madoff denied the Beverly Jarosz slaying, but he admitted to stabbing Gertrude. So like he as I mentioned, he originally, quote unquote, confessed to killing Beverly, but then later on he recanted and admitted that he just confessed because he thought they were gonna pin it on him anyway. But yeah, he did admit to stabbing Gertrude for what it's worth. So that is also something to that is noteworthy as well. And then after the journal stated that Harry said that Harry was working at the Hallie's department store in Cleveland on December 28, 1964. The journal also said that William Horgan said, quote unquote, if Harry Madoff's alibi doesn't check out, then he looks to me like a hot suspect. So because of this, and because of what the papers stated at the time about him working at Hallie's department store, it is very questionable as to whether Beverly's sister Carol, whether her statement that, quote unquote, Harry Madoff couldn't account for his whereabouts between 12 and 5 p.m. on December 28, 1964, like that statement, it is admittedly debatable. So Harry Madoff, he said that he always carried a knife and often made knives. He was chased out of Lyndhurst, Ohio for high pressure tactics as a salesman, as he was a door-to-door salesman. And like he was chased as a housewife called police saying that Harry was too persistent in sales tactics. It turned out that he was selling without a sales permit too. So Harry Joseph Madoff was tried as an adult for the Gertrude stabbing, and he was sentenced to 1 to 20 years in prison. So in 1972, which would have been like 7 years after the murder, he was granted parole, but he broke his parole and fled Ohio right away. So for the next 18 years after 1972, Harry Madoff's life would be one of fleeing, eluding authorities, using women, doing scams, fighting extradition in Atlanta and Quebec, Canada, and being convicted of federal scams in federal court. So in 1990, 18 years after 1972, Harry Madoff was granted release for the stabbing of Gertrude and the federal scams. By the time Ohio granted Harry Madoff his release, he was doing a mining scam in Arizona while on final parole bout in San Francisco.
He's a nice guy all around, ain't he?
Yeah, this guy was crazy. He was doing a mining scam in Arizona when he was granted release for the stabbing of Gurliti and the federal scams. So yeah, but so like in 1990, which was 18 years after 1972, he was granted release for the stabbing of Gurliti and the federal scams. So like 18 years after his parole. And so by the time Ohio granted Harry Madoff his release, he was already doing a mining scam in Arizona while on final parole bout in San Francisco. And when people saw he was ripping them off, he fled to Quebec, Canada. When Harry Madoff fled to Canada, it would take the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is basically Canada's version of the FBI. It would take the RCMP for short almost 3 years to apprehend Harry Madoff and to extradite him to Atlanta, USA, to stand trial for the federal scams and the parole violation in the Gurliti stabbing. Harry would go on to live in England for a number of years in the early 2000s, like around 2002 to 2006 or 2002 to 2008. His most recently known financial scam was in Austria in 2006. He is believed to be living, if he's still alive today, he is believed to be living in Europe, with Germany being a front runner, but Switzerland and Sweden being possibilities as well. Switzerland and Sweden being possibilities for places he's living as well. And like I was mentioning before, out of the great majority of the people who are thought to have done it from 1964 to now, he's one of the rare people who was not known to have actually been acquainted with Beverly at all, especially considering he only moved 3 months before the murder, and like he was someone who did not exactly get along with people. So and by the time he moved, Beverly got out of hanging out with risky people. She was leading like a relatively normal life, like a more mature life. And so there was never like the reason Harry Madoff was like everything I listed so far that's been interesting. That's why he's been a suspect to this day. But like there's no evidence that they knew each other. It's unlikely that they knew each other. And like, so in the 3 months in between the time he moved to Garfield Heights and Beverly's murder, he worked at a place where Beverly went to on occasion with her family. So while it's possible that they could have crossed paths, it is ultimately nothing but speculation. And yeah, his recanted confession and his violent crimes are like what make him somewhat plausible. And so and okay, another thing too, like outside of Harry Madoff not knowing Beverly, and outside of him moving months after all the stalking, so after the hang up phone calls, after the gifts, after the guy looking up at Beverly's window, after so that is one thing that kind of does make you wonder if it really was Harry Madoff. But another thing is, there's no way Beverly was allowing Harry Madoff in the house, because like Harry Madoff, like he was a straight up creep, and he was around.
Yeah.
There's no way Beverly was allowing this guy in. And another thing that I should have mentioned earlier on this podcast episode is Beverly. So the thing is, Beverly was very cautious and paranoid to the point where she locked her parents out of the house at one point. And she like there are not a lot of people she would have let in the house. Out of everyone that like there are a very select few people who she would have let in the house out of the list of all the suspects. And I'm not even done going through all the suspects so far. Like before I so like before I continue on with Harry with finishing up with Harry Madoff, I will say, yeah, she's not letting Harry Madoff in. And then looking back at the other people I spoke about, okay, Bruce Bilek, who was the creepy teacher who lived behind Beverly, and he had the hots for Beverly and went to see Beverly what she looked like without her clothes on.
Let me interrupt you right there for just a second. We've already gone 36 minutes over. So do we have enough on this to do another case, or should we just wrap this one up and call it done?
Okay. Because I only have 2 more suspects to talk about after this. So I think we could wrap this up now. Yeah.
Well, I think we can suffice it to say there are a lot of suspects, and a lot of them do have plausible stories, where we can believe they might have done it.
Right.
So let's just leave that right there, because and I appreciate all the work you put into this. It's obvious that you have put a tremendous amount of work into this. So thank you very much for all of that and bringing that to us tonight. But I'll go ahead and let you wrap it up, but let's just try to wrap it up in a couple.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, Bruce Balek, the creepy guy who lived behind Beverly, who like he's one of the people who Beverly definitely would have let in, and then John Palian, Beverly was not letting him in. Who was the neighbor who lived 2 doors east, the shy guy, Beverly was not letting him in. Roger McNamara, the current boyfriend at the time, Beverly would have let him in. Daniel Schulte, it is questionable whether Beverly would have let him in. James Krozek not letting in. Yeah, James Modulewski, like he didn't go back to the house. So yeah, like maybe if he went back, she would have let him in. But like yeah, I don't think he would have. Larry Young, I don't think she's letting him in. But yeah, Stella Young, because she's a woman, she could have been let in. But yeah, I don't think she was let in. But yeah, okay. When it comes to Harry Maydell, yeah, like I pretty much said all I needed to say about him. So I will yeah, like she's not letting him in, and he did move after the stalking. So yeah, I'll go on to the final two. So okay, like everyone that I was talking about, they were not in any specific order, but now we are at my two personal top theories. And I will say my top pick, which I'm saving for last, is also the top pick of both Garfield Heights Police Department and Beverly's family, most notably her sister Carol. So yeah, I'll get into my second most likely suspect right now, and that is actually Barbara Klonowski, Beverly's friend who was supposed to meet her that day. So it is possible that Barbara didn't directly do it, but she very well could have been involved. Or and like I mentioned to you early on, that there easily could, because there were two methods of murder used, that I could easily see there being two killers. So Barbara with an accomplice, that also could have been something that is notable as well. But yeah, so Barbara Klonowski was Beverly's friend who was supposed to meet her that day. Beverly and Barbara were acquaintances in 9th grade, but they did not start hanging out until 11th grade, when they started going to downtown Cleveland for shopping a few times, and even to the art museum once. Due to yeah, so the thing is, Beverly was Beverly had a ton of male admirers, and Barbara was said to be mentally ill and jealous of the attention Beverly got from boys. So you were asking earlier if Barbara was jealous of the friendship with Margie. I don't know about that, but I did hear, and I do believe that I can't say for sure, but I do believe Barbara was jealous of how good Beverly was with the opposite gender. So that is also to something of note. And like these same people who said that Barbara was jealous, who went to school with the girls, they said that Margie, Beverly's best friend, did not have a jealous bone in her body, and did not mind the attention that Beverly got from boys, but Barbara did. And teenagers and adolescents at that age, they get really mad about things like this. And then Beverly's grandma and Beverly's father both seem to both seem to think Barbara did it as well. So Beverly's grandma, like she straight up said right away after the murder that Beverly was like, I have to go, Barbara is here. Like she made sure to emphasize that Barbara was around. And then in one of the newspapers multiple years after Beverly's murder, Beverly's father, Thaddeus Jarosz, said that he differs with William Horrigan's belief about Beverly's killer, as William Horrigan was sure it was a male and Thaddeus thought it was a female. And he said, quote unquote, she is being shielded from arrest by relatives. And this was said by Beverly's father in the newspaper. So Thaddeus was definitely referring to Barbara in this statement. So Barbara's family, the Klonowskis, were a very wealthy and respected family. Barbara's grandfather owned the Bank of Cleveland, and the Klonowski family was associated with Benjamin Stefanski and the Stefanski family, who owned a bank called Third Federal Savings and Loan. So because of this, from 1964 to now, people have speculated that Barbara was Beverly's killer, or was at least involved in Beverly's killing, and the family covered it up. Barbara's brother, her younger brother, who became a lawyer, has been quite nasty with people who could even consider the possibility of his sister and or family being involved, and he's made both legal threats and personal threats to people over the years, the personal threats being violent. So there was actually an incident with me where he threatened me both legally and personally, and like he was not smart in doing that, because he did this in a public group, and he just made himself look horrible, because he was saying even the thing is, I made sure to emphasize that I was not that everything I listed about every suspect was speculation, and I was listing arguments for all the other suspects. And he was mad that I even spoke about his sister at all, and he, even though there wasn't anything he could actually do because I wasn't being libelous or slanderous or defamatory, he was getting mad, and he's like, this is defamatory and I can kick your ass. And so he was being stupid, threatening me both legally and personally, and it just made him and his family look bad. And in 2008, before John Palian, the neighbor who lived 2 doors east, before he was cleared, he spoke with the author and investigative journalist James Renner, who I mentioned. And as I mentioned to you earlier, John Palian said, quote unquote, that he was being framed and there was a cover-up going on. Just like Thaddeus Jarosz, it seems that John Palian was talking about Barbara and/or the Klonowski family, but did not want to mention any name. Because of the fact that Beverly was stalked throughout the year of 1964, leading to her murder at the end of the year, she was definitely super cautious, so she most likely would have had her doors locked and likely would only let in someone she trusted. Barbara would have been one of those people she trusted, and since she was expecting Barbara that day, she would have been the most likely person that Beverly would have let in. Barbara reported hearing loud music and a loud sound like a dresser falling when she was waiting at the door, but like if hypothetically that could have been a cover story, as she could have actually been inside the house and turned the music on herself. Nobody was there with nor saw Barbara waiting at Beverly's door. Barbara claimed to have been running late, and the only person to support that was Barbara's mom, who was a music teacher and said to be a crazy person by former students. So like Barbara and her mom were both said to be crazy people. And like I mentioned in the Bruce Bilek entry, who Bruce Bilek being alibied by his parents, like I mentioned in the Bruce entry, parents would usually protect their children even if they think or know that their child is guilty. Barbara did not meet up with their other friend Margie, who Beverly and Barbara were originally supposed to meet. So Barbara did not meet up with Margie. She just went straight home, and she did not even call Margie or let any neighbor know about the loud thump. And so Margie had to be the one to call Barbara to find out what happened. The fact that Barbara did not meet up with Margie and did not even call to let her know that she or Beverly were in common, it does look suspicious. And like and then yeah, obviously like a downside to this theory is that like a female is less likely than a male to have been able to pull this off alone. But like it's not impossible. Females can be vicious, and also like Barbara could have had help. And I will get and jealousy does bring out the worst in people as well, especially at the teenage age bracket. And like I will get into two other people who easily could have helped her at this point. So a young man called Gary Grayson, who was a classmate of someone that Beverly dated at Garfield Heights High School, picked Barbara up in his car a few blocks from Beverly's house near the time of her murder. So Gary Grayson was driving in his 1958 Corvair on Cherney Road, and he was a year older than Beverly and Barbara. He was questioned but not given a polygraph. Same thing with Barbara. Barbara was questioned but not given a polygraph. So Gary Grayson was admittedly in the area at the time of the murder, and he knew one of the people involved with Beverly that afternoon well enough for Barbara to get a ride from him. That would make him a friend of a friend. Since it is believed that Beverly's killer may have gone into a car after the dog scent stopped at McCracken, it makes one wonder if Gary Grayson was the getaway driver and was actually waiting for Barbara as opposed to running into her. Because so there was a dog scent that was tracked from Beverly's bedroom, and it led from Beverly's bedroom through the backyard onto the street behind her, which was McCracken. So Bruce Bilek, it did live on that street, which is notable. But the dog scent stopped at the road on McCracken, so that would point to Beverly's killer getting in a vehicle. And Barbara was picked up by someone in a vehicle, so that is notable as well. And Beverly's sorry, the former lead detective Carl Bagacki, he talked about Gary Grayson as well, but he did not mention him by name. And then also Beverly previously dated Barbara's cousin Stanley Klonowski, who was interviewed by police as well. Beverly was the one who broke it off with Stanley. According to Beverly, Stanley was misunderstood, disturbed, and troubled. Stanley apparently didn't seem to pan out, although just like Barbara and Gary Grayson, he did not take a polygraph and did not give fingerprints or DNA. Like he was not asked to give any of this stuff as well. And so if Barbara was behind Beverly's murder, a possibility is that either Stanley or Gary were involved and helped carry it out. Stanley may not have been over Beverly, and the breakup could have really messed him up. When you add that along with Gary's whereabouts and Barbara's jealousy, a slim possibility emerges that Barbara and Stanley and or Gary were behind it. Regardless of which one of the two Barbara had helping her, they definitely could have gotten the job on Beverly done. I'm pretty sure there was no DNA found under Beverly's fingernails, and because there were two methods of murder use, two killers is a definite possibility. Because remember, both a knife and a rope was bought to the house to kill Beverly, and both were used to kill her. So that ends what I'm saying about Barbara and anyone involved with her. But yeah, Barbara or like a Klonowski, at least like a Klonowski associated thing. That is my Barbara's my top two suspect, and the Klonowski theory, the Barbara theory, whatever you call it, that's my top two theory. So now I'm at the number one pick, and this is my top pick, and this is Beverly's sister Carol's top pick, and Garfield Heights Police Department's top pick. So this person is actually unnamed. So in 2015, the lead detective Carl Bagacki at the time, so the lead detective at the time, Carl Bagacki, and Garfield Heights Police Department got the most serious they got about the case since 2004. And in October 2015, they took the Beverly Jarosz case to the VDOC Society, a highly regarded crime-solving organization in Philadelphia. And so the VDOC Society, they are extraordinary. So Carl Bagacki described the VDOC Society as a group of law enforcement officers that are the cream of the crop, from profilers to FBI agents to detectives from all over. The VDOC Society is made up of 82 members who volunteer to serve as confidential consultants to assist law enforcement in solving difficult cold cases. Its 82 members are forensic professionals, current and former FBI profilers, criminologists, medical examiners, homicide investigators, forensic scientists, psychologists, polygraph examiners, prosecutors, and coroners. So Garfield Heights Police Department and Carl Bagacki, the lead detective, presented a PowerPoint to the VDOC Society, and the experts of the VDOC Society were able to assist Garfield Heights Police Department and bring to light a few things that Garfield Heights Police Department did not know of before. And Garfield Heights Police Department were able to develop even another suspect from that, someone who the VDOC Society came up with, who was not previously on the list of persons of interest before 2015. So all 82 members of the VDOC Society swore by their pick to GHPD. So after Beverly's sister appeared, I will say, like, going back to Harry Madoff, the violent door-to-door salesman who stabbed people, like Carl Bagacki, when he was saying that Harry Madoff, like he was talking about Harry Madoff, and he brought up the VDOC Society, he was saying that when he presented the PowerPoint to them, he said none of them went for Madoff at all. They pointed to someone completely different, and this is the guy they were pointing to. So so this was in October 2015 when they went to the VDOC Society, and keep in mind that 2016 is when the podcasts were done, and Beverly's sister Carol was still convinced Harry Madoff did it at the time, even with the knowledge of the suspect. But then in March 2017, which would be a few months after the 2016 podcast, there was a tip, and like a year and a half after the original meeting with the VDOC Society, there was a tip that came into the Garfield Heights Police Department that named the VDOC Society's pick as a suspect. Like obviously the tip did not know of the VDOC Society, but like they had the same name that the VDOC Society picked out, and they put a tip in that named this person as a suspect. So the Garfield Heights lead detective at the time, Carl Bagacki, said that the VDOC Society, the pick also had access to the Jarosz house, and the VDOC Society's pick was at the house numerous times, like, and he emphasized numerous, meaning many times, and the VDOC Society's pick was a family friend. So we know that this unnamed person who the VDOC Society picked out in 2015 was a family friend of the Jarosz family. So Carl Bagacki said that despite being a cautious girl, Beverly would have 100% let him in, and that there's no doubt about Beverly letting him in. Carl Bagacki also said that the VDOC and Beverly's sister Carol also said that the VDOC Society's picks, the family friends, the Jarosz family friend picks, so the VDOC Society, the picks friends who were to be his alibi did not confirm his story of his whereabouts on December 28, 1964, either back then or now, like in more present days. The family friend who the VDOC Society picked out also refused the polygraph tests both back then and now, refused to give DNA both back then and now, and refused to give fingerprints both back then and now. And remember how I mentioned to you that the recent updates of the case were talking about surveillance being done? Because this is one of the few people who never gave DNA, it is very likely he is the person who is being surveilled right now. And another thing is, when I spoke with the current lead detective on the case in January 2nd of this year, when I first brought up the VDOC Society's pick to him, he was kind of oblivious at, like, he was pretending to not know what I was talking about at first. He was basically trying to see if I knew this person's identity, like if I knew this person's name, because like he knows that I have a great interest in this case because people have emailed him over the years about me, and like I've spoke with him on email a couple times in 2021, and so he knows about my great interest in the case. And some people, like, they're like they were like, my interest in the case was very it was very notable considering that I don't have like a personal connection to the case and I was not alive at the time. So yeah, that's why they emailed him, either letting him know about my dedication or to the case, or just like thinking that like I was someone who would be interesting to talk to. But like another thing is that the currently detective, he like he's not like the most recently detective who had a lot of dedication to the case. Like the currently detective, he's more private, and he was not like, even though he was getting emails and stuff, he was not responsive to many people over email. Sometimes if he would respond, he'd take days to respond, and he would never speak with anyone over the phone. I was the first person he ever spoke with over the phone about the case, like the first person who was not in law enforcement, and that includes Beverly's sister. Like, I know he spoke with Beverly's sister since, but before that, I was the first person he ever spoke with on the phone. So yeah, and so when I brought up the VDOC Society's pick to him, he was acting oblivious at first, and he was basically saying that he was just trying to see if I knew who it was. Like, first he was pretending to not know who it was, and then I was basically repeating all this information to him, and then he just stopped me and he paused and he's like, yeah, I get that. I'm just wondering if you know the guy's name. And then I explained to him that I don't know what his name is, but I asked if he was still alive as of January 2, 2024. And because, like, I know in 2021, when the podcast about him was released, he was alive then. So I was just asking if he was still alive. And then he paused and he said yes, but he was trying to basically stray me away from looking into the pick more, I guess, which I guess would make sense because he doesn't like, for the sake of the investigation, this person's not being named, and so he was being very smart about it, and he was just trying to I guess stray me away from the guest more. But it was clear from the talk with him that that like he clearly thinks a lot about this person, and this person was said by the former lead detective to be the top suspect in the case by Garfield Heights Police Department. So yeah, that is why he is my top pick, and that is why he is the top pick of both Garfield Heights Police Department, and that is also why Beverly's sister Carol bumped him up over Harry Maydell after finding out all this stuff about him. But yeah, when it comes to the suspects, that is all I have to say, and I appreciate you allowing me to finish speaking up about all the suspects.
Well, thank you very much, Mahfouz. You definitely put a lot of work into it, so
Yeah,
that's wonderful. And we have gone quite a bit over, but it's been a great show, I think, and we share a lot of information. So let's go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. And I look forward to next Friday, same time, same place. And we will do it again, and we'll have another interesting case. So for now, let us say good night. So thanks everyone
right.
for tuning in to Layers of Truth, True Crime Collective. We will see you again next Friday. Have a great night.
See you then. You too.